I've got to manage myself, I've got to manage my mind. The task is not easy, but to high heights I climb.
I'm determined to succeed, so no excuses, please. If you don't want success in life, then don't hinder me. Yes, let the whole world know I'm a CEO. You are a CEO. I'm a CEO. You are a CEO. I'm a CEO. The time is here to celebrate. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. Yes, let the whole world know. The time is here to celebrate. Success is calling, so don't be late. You are a CEO.
Hello, everyone. Michael E. Parker here for another exciting show. And tonight, we're going to talk about something that is so important. Before we get into it, I just want to say good evening to you. And thank you again for coming to enjoy another show here at You Are a CEO, CEO TV Live. Now, we're tonight going to talk about something that is so critical, which is the importance of listening. Now, when you think about listening, it seems like something so simple. And yet and still, listening is something that is not easy to do. And very few people are able to listen properly. And because they're not able to listen properly, they don't understand properly. And because they don't understand properly, they don't know what to do properly. So listening is very fundamental. And so I just want to say to all of us out there that this is something that we should all take seriously. We should really not consider this something that is just a small thing, something easy to understand, something easy to do. It's something that I've learned as a professional and just even as someone that has tried to maintain healthy relationships, whether that's in my marriage, whether that's with friends, whether that's as an executive, whether that's as a mentor, whether that's as someone that also has to be mentored and to receive advice from others. It's so important to understand this thing called listening. And so tonight, I want to just do some coaching and kind of walk you through some things that are very critical to this whole ingredient of listening. So I'm going to head over to the whiteboard, and I want to start off with talking about some of the elements of listening. All right, let's go over to the whiteboard here. And I want to talk about some of the key elements of listening because, listening comes in many different elements. But there's a few that I want to really point out and focus on here tonight. So I'll just say key elements of listening. Okay. So one of the things that is very fundamental, and we'll be talking a lot about this today, is that the act of actually listening, right? And so this is kind of the centerpiece. And so a key element of listening is to listen, right? And we'll come back to that. Key element of listening is to listen. And that's why we see the word listen is in the word listening. But what I want to talk about is before we can even get to listen, there's a word I want to introduce here, which is care. So care feeds into the ability to listen. Now we'll come back to that and what this actually means, but I want you to remember this is that care is a part of being able to listen, okay? Another key, so when we talk about listen, now let's move a little bit forward with respect to listen, is that there's another level of listening, and that is active listening. And some of you have heard of this, But this is another level that goes deeper into listening. So I want to really call these out as really, really critical and important elements. Now, there's a lot we could talk about with this, but I want to hone in on these three specifically. So when we think about care, okay, and, a lot of times why people struggle to listen is that they're not able to realize that listening has a lot to do with how much you care about what's being said, how much you care about who's saying it. Now, a great example of this is that there's times when you receive information that you need to talk to someone or get information from someone. And if you hold that person in a very high regard, or if you feel that person has a certain amount of authority or they can impact your life a certain way, you will listen a lot more attentively. And it's someone that you may not value, their ability to do certain things or even what they have to say. Sometimes you kind of zone out or you don't take it as serious. And now this is sometimes okay. Sometimes we're joking with friends, we're sitting amongst friends and family, or we're having a good time and we're not fully listening to everything being said, and we know it's safe. It's okay to do that. But it's important that when you should care, that you actually do care, right? So when we get into this care area, a big part of this has to do with priorities. Okay, so here we're dealing with priorities. So we care about the things that are a priority to us at the time, right? So we have to begin to really assess, what am I making the priority? Why is this something that should be a priority? Now, so again, sometimes we can feel that in a relationship. If we feel someone's not listening to us, we get the sense that we're not a priority, right? Or even if you're talking to someone or someone is talking to you on a professional level, or if there's someone trying to give you information and you are not connected, right? Or you're always forgetting, you're always missing the point. Well, again, there might be a struggle of really making sure that you have made it a priority, right? Now, I know that even today, there's a lot of things that impact our ability to listen. And there's conditions like ADD, ADHD, and more people are getting attention deficits just in the world we live with cell phones and so many distractions. And so attention deficit is very real, where your mind might wander. And so, but even people with ADD, even people with ADHD, they're a little bit more focused when something is a priority, if something is very important to them, right? So when we think about priority, right, there's a definite link to importance, right? So we have to think about what's a priority, what is important. And if something's not as important to me, I might need to be conscious that I have to work a little harder, right? And we'll talk about that. But we have to start off with learning how to make it a priority to listen to certain things, right? Especially when that something is not something that you're accustomed to or normally not as interested in. So that means I have to choose to make that a priority, right? It's just like if I'm a professional and I don't know a lot about marketing and I just never been into it, or I don't know a lot about accounting, I don't like numbers, I've never been into it. But as an entrepreneur, I find out I need to learn about that to be able to grow, for me to grow as an entrepreneur. So this means I have to make it a priority now and make it important now so that I actually have a sense of care. So when someone is trying to tell me about this area that I'm not normally comfortable in, I can move into actually being able to listen. So care is such an important thing. We have to learn how to recognize and be honest that sometimes I don't care, right? I know that sounds bad, but sometimes we don't care. And so we have to learn how to care. We have to learn how to make something important. We have to learn how to make that a priority. Sometimes you might be even trying to build a healthy relationship. It could be girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband. It could just be a friendship. And we have to work a little harder to make that person a greater priority and to actually care, right? To tell ourselves, not I'm going to try to listen, I'm going to try to care. Because when you start to come from that place, you'll find listening to be easier. All right, so let's go a little bit deeper here. So now when we think about listen, so some of the key things when we think about listen, right, is the actual ability to focus, okay? So we want to be able to focus when we're getting information, when we're in a conversation, the ability to be able to focus. And so a lot of times focusing has to do after we've, learned to prioritize. And again, people who are really good listeners, they can tap into caring about what people say and not even know the person, not even be, it's no relationship. They just got really good at making sure they focus, right, on, caring about someone who's trying to give information to them. Very important to care about someone who's trying to give information to them. So we know in focus, whenever there's a conversation, there's always a sender, and then of course there is a receiver. So when that communication comes, we know that there's a cycle that needs to be created where the receiver is able to listen to the sender. Now we know our subject today is not so much how this message is being sent, which is another element. So how people send a message can make it easier to focus on what they're saying. How people communicate, the choice of words, tone, demeanor. But on the receiving end, there's a sense of focus that we have to have, right? Where I'm really concentrating that this is something that I want to do, right? The light bulb has to turn on in a sense, right? Where I really have the light bulb on to say, hey, what's being said here is something that I want to actually turn the light on and give my attention to. And it's a work, it's a job. It's not something that just comes easy. I have to actually focus in and turn that light on when someone is talking to me. And sometimes it's something to practice, is really to concentrate on what someone is saying, right? While they're talking and your mind wants to wander, to really, it's a battle as your mind begins to drift, to bring it back. It begins to drift, bring it back, and really try to tune in. Now, I know that when we talk about focus, a lot of times, by default, when we talk about focus, we have to deal with distraction. Right? So distraction, we know there's so many distractions today, especially when we look at our mobile phones, right? We got a lot of distractions and apps and stuff going on. And, when we look at that mobile phone, and sometimes today, while we're trying to listen, we're doing so many different things, and I'm guilty of it too. But you got to know when it's harder for you to focus, to not add distraction to the process of the listening. So this is another really key element, is making sure that we begin to understand, for this type of listening, have I set myself up? Another element is environment. So when I'm thinking about trying to focus, I want to understand, have I picked the right environment for this conversation? So some conversations shouldn't be discussed with the television on and sitting in the midst of madness, right? Some discussions shouldn't be discussed, by text. Some things should be a phone call. So a part of focus is to also think about, where should this be discussed? Why am I talking about this in this environment, right? And then what types of distractions are in that environment? And then also, how comfortable is that environment for me to be able to focus on that type of conversation? So this is another very, very important element when we talk about listening. Now, let's go to the next level. So we talked about care and how priorities and importance have to do with that. We talked about listen. We got into focus, the conversation cycle, environment, distraction. Now, I want to go over to active listening. So we talk about active listening. So now we're really talking about participation. Okay? So someone that is actively listening is actually learning how to participate in the conversation, right? So this is something, again, we talk about the importance of listening, be getting to this level, right, that you're now an active participant in the conversation. So we talked about care, we talked about listen and the environment distraction, but now participation means that I'm going to actually, now this actually will help you listen better, is to become an active listener that is actually engaged. So to be engaged in the listening is to participate, and also, so another key word is involved, right? So you're involved in the listening. Now, how do I do that? So being able to do things like mirror, I'm gonna say mirroring. And mirroring means that I can mirror back what you said. In a mirror, we see a reflection of ourselves. We see the same thing. So when you're talking to me and you begin to communicate and I'm able to say, so just to make sure I understand, you're saying ABC, right? And I mirror back what you said to be an active participant. So mirroring is very important so that you really begin to stay connected. And not only is that mirroring good for them so that you give them confidence back to sender or receiver, you give the sender confidence when you mirror back that I want to confirm this is what you said, right? This is what you meant, right? It gives them confidence, but also while you're doing that, you're deepening your understanding and focus. So this is why mirroring is so powerful. Another key thing is demeanor. So when you're listening, so if I'm listening and I'm, they're frowning, it makes the sender feel like, uncomfortable. If you have a more welcoming approach, if you nod your head. So demeanor, let me go to the next one, which would be gesture. Right? So gesture, meaning nodding of the head, a smile, you can even add, your tone, like saying, I got that. That makes sense. Doing things like that. This seems really simple, but you'd be surprised how hard it is to communicate with some people because they're not active listeners. You don't know if they appreciate what you're saying or not. So this is, again, we're talking about feedback. Right? Giving feedback during the listening. Feedback is to say yes, or that makes sense. Got it. Okay, all right, I see what you mean. All of that does wonders to strengthen this process of sender and receiver. So we have to understand that. We have to make sure we're an active participant. If not, what tends to happen is this individual gets lost and they don't know if they're fully being effective at conveying the message to you. And better yet, when you're actively listening and you're doing these things, you'll find yourself absorbing more because you have to concentrate more to do these things. So these are all related, right? So now, for me to mirror back, I had to be listening in the first place. Then the listening gets deeper when I mirror. When I have the right demeanor towards you, I have to be looking at you and focused on what you're saying. For me to give a gesture, I can only do that because I'm in context with what you're talking about. The same thing with giving feedback, right? Tone, all of these things. So this is extremely, extremely important. So let me move out of the way here because I want to go into another area here of listening in a minute. I want you to get a good look at that. So just take a look at that. As you can see, care. Listen, active listening. So all of this is a part. Care is dealing with our priorities, our importance. Listen is dealing with environment. We're distraction. And so that we could focus and that we understand there's a receiver and a sender and we have to work towards that listening. Active listening, we're dealing with participation. We're dealing with being involved in the conversation, not to feel that conversations are just supposed to happen and just fall on you. You're supposed to be actively participating and involved. So using mirroring, demeanor, gestures, feedback to be able to show that form of active listening. All right, so you can take some screenshots. Hopefully you got some of that there. So I'm going to erase this and we're going to go into another area here. So as you can see, as I'm talking about this, I hope you're listening, okay? Pun intended, because when we think about this, a lot of times when we're considering listening and we're considering all the different elements, I want you to also look at another aspect. So looking at critical areas to listen. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the critical areas to listen. There's so many areas that we need to do that. So think about, we have to, so we're going to just talk about a few different dynamics here, but we have to be able to listen to constructive feedback. Okay? We have to be able to listen to constructive feedback. And I'll come back to this. We have to listen to our body. And he said, well, what is that? Okay? We'll come back to that. We have to be able to listen in business. I'll come back to that. We have to be able to listen in relationships. These are all really, critical areas, right? And there's so many more I could talk about, but I just want to show you just a few examples when we think about this. So when we're thinking about constructive feedback, right? So here with constructive feedback, some of the things that we often struggle with, let me get some different colors here. So constructive feedback, we tend to deal with defensiveness, right? Because we don't want to hear anything that is related to telling us there's something we need to do better, or that we need to fix or repair, right? So constructive, you see the term construct in there, we see that as repair because something is broken. Right? So automatically there's defensiveness, right? There's emotion, right? Maybe some ego in there, right? So we have to be careful that we're on guard when it comes to constructive feedback. When someone tells you there's something I want to get across to you, there's something I want you to give you feedback on so you can be better, a better man, a better woman, a better parent, whatever it might be. Whatever you're a better student, whatever it is you're trying to do, better in a particular career. When constructive feedback comes, we have to be careful that we don't let ego, defensiveness, and emotion block the ability to listen. So this means there are some things within us that will create a wall, right? So, and that's the key is we get, here we create this wall, right? And this wall of protection that we create, it begins to block. So this feedback maybe will make us 10 times better, but it's blocked by this, this wall here, right? And we've got this wall of protection that we create. But this wall, again, will protect from the growth that was possible. So we have to be careful with that, with constructive feedback. Now, let's go into the body. Now, another element, we think about the body, there are so many different areas that we need to think about, right? So think about with the body, we have to listen to family history, okay? So again, being willing to listen when you hear something runs in your family. And sometimes we don't want to listen to that, but we have to listen to that because this is probably one of the highest percents of the causes that we, end up with different things we deal with in our health is because of things that ran in our family. So we have to be willing to listen there. We have to be able to listen when we get different conditions, right? We get a condition, we don't want to listen to the fact that our body is telling us something and we have to adjust to that, right? The same thing with our health in general. So we can feel when we're not, our body will speak to us when we're not eating in the best way. Our body will speak to us when we're not getting enough rest. My body definitely speaks to me. Our body will speak to us when we need to work out. We need to move more. right? And so we have to be able to listen. This is a critical area. Now, we talked about listening in a conversation, but it's much deeper than that. We have to also be willing to listen to our body. And our body has so many indicators, right? And that's why when we go, think about it. When you go to the doctor, they start to use all sorts of forms of listening to try to give you information about what's happening. So they've been trained to listen to the areas of the body, but then once they communicate that to us, we have to then be willing to listen to that, really take it to heart, right? So there's so many things we can look at, right? There's so many elements from cholesterol to blood sugar to, our heart, all these different things that we get checked. And so being willing to listen there is so critical as well. Now, another element, when we think about business, right, there's a couple of elements. So as a professional, I have to be able to listen. Also as an entrepreneur, right? So both of these require that. And I want to call out this element because when we're thinking about business, as a professional, we have to be able to actually listen to feedback of others that we're working with, be able to listen to the dynamics of the environment you're in as a professional, be able to listen to, when you see that you keep getting feedback in a particular area as a professional, right? And you're getting feedback about areas as a professional that you need to do better, or you're able to see what's changing in the organization. Are you able to listen to see what is being said by the decisions being made by that company or by that department? You have to be able to listen in that regard. As an entrepreneur, are you able to listen to the market? Are you able to listen to the customer, right? All of these are different forms of being able to do that. It's so important. You won't survive if you're not able to listen to the voice of that customer. You are not able to listen to the market. So these are other deeper areas of listening, right? And then when you think about relationships, oh my goodness, you're dealing with things like marriage, things like friendship, right? And these are some critical areas to listen, right? There's people who are roommates, right? There's all kinds of different dynamics. Being able to listen. And this is a critical area because when you're in a marriage and you got two people that don't know how to listen, or even just one of them that don't know how to listen, it becomes very hard because you're talking past each other. No one is actually talking to each other. And throughout, if you're going to have a long-term relationship, there's going to be so many problems and challenges and changes to work through. If you're not able to talk about them and, more importantly, listen to each other, you'll never be able to deal with the real problem or the real issues. You'll always be talking past it. It's the same thing in a friendship, being able to listen, right? To be a good friend. Or a roommate situation. So all these are areas, these are relationships, and we can go to, family and so many different things. But in our relationships, it's so critical that we know how to listen, because if we don't, right away, you'll start to see challenges and dynamics in that relationship that begin to slowly fall apart. So this is what we're talking about. We think about critical areas to listen, right? Constructive feedback, listening to our body, listening in business, in our career, in entrepreneurship, listening in our relationships. How many more can you think about, right? There's so many areas that we can be critical in listening that are beyond a conversation. So I want you to think about that a little bit, right? And think about different ways and different elements that you can begin to do that. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this discussion on listening. We went really into it from many different angles, and now I got something I need you to listen to. So as we prepare to wrap up here, I want you now to listen closely. Listen closely. So speaking of listening, I want you to listen closely right now. I got something exciting to tell you. So get your pen and paper ready, because I want to make sure, get your thumbs ready on your cell phone or whatever you do. If you're on your computer, I want you to write this down. All right. Everything's about to change. May 26th from 6 to 8:30, something is going to happen. There's going to be an event hosted by our CEO, and we've got a lot to say, and I'm not going to tell you anything about it now, but all I want you to know is everything's about to change. Mark your calendar, make sure you're listening right now. Make sure you're listening. Mark your calendar. Everything's about to change. May 26th, 6 p.m. Make sure you mark your calendar now. Do not miss this event. Make your plans, adjust your plans, do whatever you got to do. We got a lot to do on May 26th, and I'll tell you, when you come, you'll find out. And we'll be talking about this leading up to the event, but mark your calendar. All right. Now, our next show, I want you to know about our next show. There's so much going on in the pandemic. There's so much happening. We're going to talk about how work will never be the same. You are not going to want to miss this. I also have a special guest on this show, so do not miss this next discussion about work will never be the same. All you professionals out there, people striving, working toward their career, everyone out there trying to take the next step, we're going to go into it and get into it. What's going on? What has happened? How have things changed? And why will work never be the same? From now until then, get out there and let the whole world know that you are a CEO that knows how to listen, a CEO that knows how to collaborate, a CEO who knows how to actively participate in a conversation so that you can make an executive decision every day to get the most out of the things you do, because before you can get people to listen to you, you got to be willing to listen to them. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Until our next show, keep being the CEO of your life.